Mic check one.
Check two.
Mic check one.
Right, good morning. We will get started here momentarily. We do not have a court reporter in the room, or I think online, but we can certainly get this transcribed, and so I'll try to proceed as if we have a court reporter. Right, good morning. We are on the record. This is the on-the-record presentation for file number EW 2025-0220 in the matter of the establishment of a collaborative working case dedicated to reviewing the consolidation of jurisdictions of Evergy Metro Incorporated DBA Evergy Missouri Metro and Evergy Missouri West Incorporated DBA Evergy Missouri West. I'm Ron Pridgeon. I'm the regulatory law judge assigned to preside over this presentation. It's being held on May 20th, 2025 in the Governor Office Building in Jefferson City, Missouri. The time is about 10:02 a.m. Although counsel is not required to participate, I will ask if any counsel would like to enter an appearance, beginning with Evergy, please.
Yes, Judge. On behalf of the Evergy companies, let their record reflect the appearance of James Fisher with Fisher and Doherty, PC. Our address is 2081 Honeysuckle Lane, Jefferson City, Missouri 65109. I have several folks with us that we can introduce at the appropriate time.
Mr. Fisher, thank you. Any entry on behalf of the staff of the commission?
Yes, thank you, Judge. This is Travis Pringle, Eric Vandergriff, and also Lexi Klaus are all here on behalf of staff. Our contact information is 200 Madison Street, P.O. Box 360, Jefferson City, Missouri 65102. Thank you.
Mr. Pringle, thank you. Any entry on behalf of the Office of the Public Counsel?
Yes, good morning, Judge. Lindsay Van Gerpen on behalf of the OPC. Our mailing address is 200 Madison Street, Jefferson City, Missouri. And
John Kleiser on the behalf of the OPC as well, same address.
Right, Ms. Van Gerpen, Mr. Kleiser, thank you. Any other counsel wishing to enter an appearance? All right, hearing none, we will hear from Evergy here in just a moment. Any questions or anything from the bench or from parties before Evergy makes its presentation?
Judge, I would introduce Kevin Gunn to kick us off today from Evergy's standpoint.
Very good. Mr. Gunn, good morning. Thank you very much. Whenever you're ready.
Thank you. May it please the Commission. My name is Kevin Gunn, and I serve as Evergy's Vice President of State and Federal Regulatory Policy. I'm joined today by Darren Ives, Vice President of Regulatory Affairs, and Matt Doherty, Director of Regulatory Affairs. Matt has played a pivotal role as the point person on this project, and after a few introductory remarks, I'd turn it over to him for a formal presentation. As you know, this on the record stems from a settlement agreement in Evergy's last rate case. However, Evergy has embraced this requirement wholeheartedly, as exploring jurisdictional consolidation is a strategic priority for the company. To support this effort, we have collaborated with our internal teams and engaged experts from Concentric Energy Advisors to compile this initial presentation. Before we delve into the substance of the presentation, I want to underscore a few key points. First, collaboration is paramount. Evergy sees this as a collective effort. While we have worked diligently to identify potential challenges, we recognize there may be additional considerations. Our first workshop is designed to ensure that we address all identified issues while incorporating concerns that are important to other stakeholders. Second, this is a complex undertaking. It has become clear, at least to me, that jurisdictional consolidation is not a Gordian knot that can be severed in a single stroke. The challenges are real, and unwinding decades of financial and legal entanglements will require careful collaboration, thoughtful decision-making, and most importantly, time. Third, we value ongoing input. Evergy has not predetermined a course of action. We are eager to hear from stakeholders participating in these workshops, and their insights will be invaluable as we navigate this process together. Darren, Matt, and I will be available for questions during and after the presentation. With that, I'll turn it over to Matt for the formal presentation. Thank you.
Well, good morning. Let's see, there we go. So this is how I'd like to kind of spend my time with you all this morning. Thought I'd first start with just doing a general recap on the purpose of the docket and the upcoming workshops that we'll talk about. Then I wanted to take a few moments and just spend just giving a brief overview of some of the merger history of Evergy that got us to the point of where we are today. Then we want to spend a few minutes talking about Evergy's goals and objectives as we think about approaching jurisdictional consolidation evaluation and how we're thinking about that. Then discuss some of the potential benefits that we think could be achieved from such a pursuit, as well as the challenges and issues that we unearth along the way that we're going to need to be able to successfully address or mitigate to be able to move forward with any of these options that we talk about. And then I'll wrap up and talk about some of the next steps that we have going on in the docket itself. So you all will recall that the purpose of this docket was opened as a result of settlement with the parties in Evergy, Missouri West rate case that concluded at the end of last year. And as part of the settlement, the parties agreed that we would have this kickoff meeting with the commission where we're talking about, today really the purpose is to talk about those key issues that we believe need to be addressed as we approach jurisdictional consolidation. What are all the different things that really need to be part of that dialogue and evaluation? Then we'll follow up with a series of workshops needed to start in the second quarter of this year. So our first workshop is going to be in early June with the parties. And then we've got another workshop every quarter throughout the remainder of the year. And then when we're done, we'll be back in front of the commission to provide an overview of all the different potential options that was discussed during the workshop, as well as Evergy's recommendation for moving forward. This is a bit of an eye chart, but it kind of shows you that path I just described, as well as some of the requirements that we have in between each workshop. We'll be filing a report in the docket to summarize everything that was discussed with the parties, as well as capture any of those answers to questions that came up during the workshop that still were outstanding. So not to spend too much time on this, but Evergy is a product of our past mergers and acquisitions, and it's a result of many years of independent management decisions, different rates, different policy, different regulatory orders through the years. And so that obviously informs and impacts kind of who we are today. I'm not going to go through all of the history, but I did want to highlight a few key transactions. The top part of the chart looks at some of our past legal transactions. Starting with 1992, Kansas Power and Light acquired Kansas Gas and Electric. They formed Western Resources as a result of that acquisition. Later in 2002, changed their name to Westar Energy. But of note, during the time of that transaction, they kept KG&E as a separate legal entity, and that remains to this day. In 2000, you had Utilicorp, formerly Missouri Public Service, acquire St. Joe Light and Power, and then they had a name change to Aquila in 2002 as well. And then the next major milestone is in 2008 when Great Plains Energy, Kansas City Power and Light's parent company, acquired Aquila. And then we had in 2018 the merger between Great Plains Energy and Westar Energy. And what's notable, though, is when you look at these legal transactions, the rate consolidation of those separate legal entities did not occur at the same time. Many of these are still separate to this day. Other examples took many years to where they worked through different issues to try to bring those rate structures, the pricing closer together to avoid significant bill impacts to customers. I'll just highlight two examples. You had the KPL and KG&E transaction where they took 17 years for management between the time of the original legal entity consolidation to where they were ready to go to a formal proceeding at the KCC to bring those to full rate consolidation. And that took another 4 years to kind of get that done through the process. And then St. Joe Light and Power, of course, we had the legal transaction in 2008. In 2012, the parties reached agreement to formally move towards consolidating the rates between those two rate jurisdictions, and then that took another 5 years to actually complete that in a couple of rate cases to get that done. So this is Evergy today. I'll just highlight that we are an entity of 3 operating subsidiaries, 4 legal utility entities, and 4 different rate jurisdictions. And so as you can see kind of along the green boxes on the chart, you've got our legal entities with Evergy Metro, which is a single operating utility with 2 different rate jurisdictions across both Missouri and Kansas. You've got Evergy Kansas Central as the operating company with also a separate legal entity of Kansas South as a subsidiary. And you've got them operating as a combined Kansas rate jurisdiction today. And then you've got Evergy Missouri West, which is its own operating utility, its own separate legal entity, and its own separate rate jurisdiction today. So as we talk about jurisdictional consolidation, Evergy is really thinking about it from 2 distinct perspectives. First is legal entity consolidation, which is the merging of corporate units in a holding company structure that we talk about consolidation of operating companies. So as an example, that could be consolidating Evergy Missouri West into Evergy Metro. And then we have rate jurisdiction consolidation, talking about combining those rate structures, the revenue requirement, and the pricing of those distinct jurisdictions. And we think about it in these kind of 3 distinct steps. Technically, you could approach legal entity consolidation and rate jurisdiction consolidation separately and independently, but you're also not going to unlock all the benefits potentially available when you look at them in conjunction with each other. On the rate jurisdiction consolidation also, you don't have to necessarily take these steps in this order, but we think it makes a lot of sense to approach it in this manner, where you're first looking at the different rate structures between the distinct companies, getting those aligned so when you bring them together, they join cohesively, and then getting to a single revenue requirement so that at the point you're then at pricing, it's much clearer as to what the bill impacts are going to be to customers and what those mitigation steps can be to address that. So high-level goals for legal entity consolidation, I'm going to go into these in more detail in a moment, but we think of regulatory simplification, fewer filings. We think of enhancing access to capital in the case of Evergy Missouri West. That is improving the financial profile for a smaller Evergy Missouri West if it's consolidated with a larger entity. Ability to more efficiently serve load across jurisdictional footprints, simplification of customer offerings and communication, whereas today they have different prices and different programs sometimes, and this would be an ability to streamline that. In some cases, you've got neighbors, right, if they're along the jurisdiction that are in the same media market, seeing different information. And then potentially achieving some cost savings and operating efficiencies along the way. So as we think about the work of evaluating legal entity consolidation, a couple key things as we kind of approach the work. One, we're looking at what are the different structures and the different combinations of potential end states. So it's potentially consolidating Evergy Missouri West into Evergy Metro, consolidating Evergy Kansas South into Evergy Kansas Central, the splitting of Evergy Metro into 2 separate legal entities for 2 separate states. And then ultimately, potentially, the combination, then you take that next step and combine those into a single operating utility with a single jurisdiction per state. And then, of course, we're going to have to develop the business case for legal consolidation and capturing all those benefits and how they're going to drive those opportunities for customers and stakeholders. Just as importantly, though, is to identify all the different challenges associated with legal consolidation and identifying what those mitigating factors are going to be for each of those issues that arise to be able to move forward. In some cases, as we get to key decision points and milestones, if you get to a point where, you know, the juice isn't worth the squeeze, it's important to have those off-ramps identified too, that if it's at the detriment to continue on the same path, we need to be flexible and open to looking at a different course of action if the evaluation tells us that information. And then we'll be cataloging a lot of very detailed steps, right, and processes as we go through the evaluation to make sure that this is very complex endeavor, and there are a lot of considerations to take place. And so as we think about putting a roadmap together, it's going to need to have enough detail to really think through all the different things that could be impacted through legal consolidation, having those decision points, milestones, and timelines laid out. Some of the goals for rate consolidation, again, I'll dig into this more in just a moment, but simplified, enhanced customer experience, also getting that regulatory simplification, getting to that single revenue requirement for Missouri. Simplified billing with consolidated rates, as well as the ability to eliminate some of our legacy rates. It also improves affordability for our customers by sharing those costs across a broader customer base. And as we think about approaching, whatever the recommendation is and moving forward with any kind of rate consolidation, obviously it's going to be important to have stakeholder buy-in along the way. I'm not going to go through everything on this slide. There's a lot of the same steps that we're going to take for our review of rate jurisdictional consolidation, just as we would for legal entity consolidation. One of the key things to highlight, though, is in the first initial steps is really working through all the different rate structure differences between West and Missouri and lining that out. So I mentioned this, at the top of the discussion, but you could look and pursue legal entity consolidation separately from rate jurisdiction consolidation. But as this kind of chart attempts to show, they really do have some distinct benefits that are unlocked by each of the different activities. And there is some overlap, but a lot of it is distinct. And so I'll go into a little bit more detail to blow that out for each of these. As we think about legal entity consolidation potential benefits, I mentioned regulatory simplification. So this is going to also reduce those number of allocations that we currently do today as we work with companies. Obviously, reduce the number of filings and the cases that come before the commission. Simplified corporate structure includes reducing the number of tax filings that we would have to do, the FERC Form 1s, the audits, and also it would eliminate some of the double taxation we have today when we have inventory shared between our corporate affiliates. And then it would reduce mortgages and streamline borrowing. We could reduce the number of indentures that we have accountability to. And it would, as I mentioned before, also strengthen the financial position and provide stronger credit ratings for some of our entities. When you have 2 larger entities as opposed to 4 smaller entities, that can achieve some benefit from a financial position. The expanded bondable capacity is really Kansas specific, related to the consolidation of Evergy Kansas South into Kansas Central. But then there are a couple other benefits I'll just touch on. You've got, with regards to the reduced coal-heavy utility financing risk, the different, depreciation rates in states can impact some of those co-owned assets. You've got efficient system and resource planning. This is a significant benefit where today, when we do our integrated resource plans, we do them by operating company. We could get to where we're doing it at a statewide level for Evergy. And significantly, too, I'd mentioned that every time that we need to build a new generation unit, it requires us, in order to do so, to get permission not only from the Missouri Commission, but the Kansas Commission as well. So as we think about the potential of splitting Evergy Metro, that is a key benefit that would be achieved by reducing the number of times that we have to go before different commissions with potentially different policy priorities as we try to get approval of assets. On rate jurisdictional consolidation,
Mr.
yes.
I'm sorry.
Yes,
Can I ask a quick question?
sure.
So you just referenced it, and I was going to wait till the end, but I think it might help me better understand some of the conversation. So you referenced splitting Metro, and it's listed on slide 12. but slide 8 map shows that there's separate, Kansas Metro, Missouri Metro. So talk to me about splitting Metro, what it means, where are the resources, I feel like I'm missing something.
Sure. So today, we have Evergy Metro, which is the legal entity, the operating company, and it actually sits over both Missouri and Kansas. So we've got, about 309,000 Evergy Missouri Metro customers, about 277,000 Evergy Kansas Metro customers. And today, we allocate those assets using allocating factors for the same asset that's owned by the company to the different jurisdictions and the different customers.
Okay, so we're really referencing changing just the legal structure.
Correct, as it relates to that, because today we already have separate rate jurisdictions for those customers.
Thank you.
Sure. So moving on to, and please interrupt me at any time. So as we move on to rate jurisdictional consolidation, again, some of those benefits, similar to legal entity consolidation, you also get that regulatory simplification and fewer reporting that you have to do. Also, as we have business practices that are simplified, then we can, redirect those resources to support other customer needs. It also streamlines the reporting across the footprint, like I indicated. I also talked about the improved customer experience that you can get from really promoting that universal service, where today we have different processes sometimes different programs and different rates, and it also helps with communication to customers to get into one rate jurisdiction. It also simplifies the billing processes for us as we reach out and work with our customers. And then it can improve affordability, as those costs are going to be spread over a larger customer base than they are today. And then I just mentioned that, we talked a little bit about the benefits from state policy differences, how they can mitigate the challenge there. But even consolidating within one state, you can get some benefits where we might get an outcome that is not always similar, even between Evergy Missouri Metro or Evergy Missouri West, and that might be due to timing of when the cases are filed or different stakeholders participating in different dockets. So there's some benefits there as well. As I mentioned, there are also some very unique challenges and significant challenges that are going to need to be addressed and mitigated as we evaluate whether to move forward on legal entity consolidation or jurisdictional rate consolidation. Kind of blowing these out for legal entity. Probably we talk about the benefits of splitting Metro. At the same time, splitting Evergy Metro is also probably the biggest lift through this whole thing, because there is really a lot of, like I said, allocations of all the generation assets and transmission assets that are going to need to be split apart and figure out, okay, what are those new fair allocations? And so that's something that is important to address. You might have customer pushback on legacy investment sharing. So, for example, we consolidate Evergy Missouri West with Evergy Metro. Evergy Missouri West isn't currently an owner in Wolf Creek Nuclear Plant. So how do we think about the appropriate and fair way to address that if we consolidate those two utilities together for their legal entity jurisdictions? You also might see a shift in property tax. So the way that Missouri distributes property taxes is by pole miles. And so if we have a legal consolidation between Metro and Evergy Missouri West, you might see that tax burden for our community shift. So we have impacts to our communities that we need to think about as well. There could be a scenario where some of the taxes collected from more urban areas are shifted to more rural areas, and that can impact those county operating budgets as they think about collecting the taxes. When we talk about half measures, that's an example of maybe just merging Evergy Missouri West into Metro, but not doing the steps like splitting Evergy Metro along with that because that unlocks additional benefits. So you're going to get half of some of the benefit, but maybe not the full potential of the benefits of thinking through the different combinations of consolidation. And then anything that we do in Missouri as it relates to legal entity consolidation is going to require action with the Kansas Commission as well because of the Evergy Metro ownership and the allocations that occur with those Kansas customers. And so if we move forward with any legal entity consolidation, that will require a merger proceeding in both states as well, and we'll have to work through the different standards that each state also has for that. And then finally,
Matt,
yes.
I had a question about that too.
Sure.
I know we're having this working docket and this on the record, but what proceedings have been initiated in Kansas that are similar, or are there any?
Right. There's currently no formal proceeding at this time open in Kansas, but our intent is to be having discussions concurrently with some of our Kansas stakeholders as we go through this process in Missouri. I just wanted to highlight, creating an invalid end state is a challenge too. So if we're in the example where we just split Evergy Metro, that's not helping things because we're creating an even smaller utility. And one of the things we're trying to do, right, is to create through consolidation, the larger entity to help those financial profiles. So just, if the recommendation were to just split Metro and we stop there, that's really not a valid end state because it's going to exacerbate some of the issues that we're trying to address. I just wanted to show this slide just to highlight an example of one of those challenges that really, there's real costs associated with thinking through legal entity consolidation that are going to need to be addressed to be able to move forward with that. I preface that, this slide, the analysis is as of October 2024. It's a point in time, and these numbers can materially change as interest rates move. So I do want to say that. So it's just to be illustrative, though, absent any bondholder consent, if we go to modify the indentures for some of these mortgages, you could see some make-whole payments and refinancing costs be very significant, like $185 million in this example of make-whole payments across the different utilities as they need to refinance, and then $430 million in refinancing costs. That could be potentially prohibitive to moving forward if those aren't addressed.
I did have a question on this slide.
Sure.
What is PV?
Where is
It's
that?
referenced negative PV of interest rate
Present
cost.
value?
Present value, thank you.
Sure. So when we think about some of the challenges for rate jurisdictional consolidation, again, splitting Metro has its challenges because we're going to have to deal with allocations. And I mentioned already, we've got to deal with the different existing rate differentials that exist today between, for example, Evergy Missouri West and Evergy Missouri Metro. We've got to ensure that we have, that we don't have cost of service differences as we work through the mitigation strategies. The allocation between states, again, it's here twice just to emphasize that if we're splitting Metro, that's going to have implications on the existing allocations of the rate jurisdictions today, even if we don't do anything else on rate jurisdiction consolidation. And then, of course, we're going to need to have robust tools to be able to identify customer impact of any consolidation proposals. And we do have UI Planner today to help us do that, and so that's going to be important as we work through the process. But need to be able to identify those impacts at the individual customer level because you're going to need to think through what those mitigation strategies are going to be. And then, of course, stakeholder input as we work through the process is going to be critical, and you're going to need buy-in from them for whatever recommendation when we move forward. And so why is rate consolidation so difficult? Because when we align these rate structures, you're going to have customers that some are going to see bill decreases and some are going to see bill increases. And so it's going to be critical that, we have mitigation strategies to address those, because unmitigated, that can be a significant and challenging thing to explain to an individual customer. Bill impacts to small groups of customers can also make it difficult to move on rate consolidation efforts unless those are addressed. It's going to be really important to have additional customer communication and customer service support to move through consolidation about what is changing and why we are making these changes. And then we'll have to make sure that we have the billing system capability to make all the implemented changes, and that will be certainly a part of the analysis going through this. And then I just finally say that any successful consolidation is going to really require commitment from the utility and the commission, because this is something that can take many years to achieve through the process, depending on those mitigation efforts and the differences in the rate structures and the pricing. So I'll just wrap up my comments as we spent today really focusing on, what are the issues, what are the potential benefits, what are the challenges that we really need to make sure we're addressing through here. That's fine, but then how do we turn that into an action plan to actually think through what does a roadmap look like? And so I wanted to hit a couple of these points as we go through that work. First, we have all these different iterations like I mentioned we will look at, but we want to put together a roadmap that starts with a pathway towards establishing a single operating utility and a single rate jurisdiction in each state. And then as we go through the analysis, there may be reasons why we pivot to some other endpoint, but that's our starting point as we try to think through all the things that need to occur for our evaluation. And so it's going to be also important to evaluate the interdependencies and the motivating factors between those two distinct work streams of legal entity consolidation and rate jurisdiction consolidation. There's going to be things in one work stream that impacts the work of the other one, and so we got to make sure that we've identified where those are and what those impacts are going to be. It's important that we have creative solutions for consolidation as we think about mitigation strategies and overcoming those roadblocks. And then we've got to define those key decision points along the way that are going to impact the point in the road of, do we continue moving forward in the same direction, or do we need to, based on the new analysis that we found, that it makes sense to pivot to a different option. And then I would just say that as we stage this out, the roadmap will be a consolidated roadmap so that it looks at how do we think through legal entity consolidation and rate jurisdiction consolidation in such a way where we're sequencing the events in each of those work streams as they might have those interdependencies to optimize the outcome of both as we do that work. And so I just throw this back. There's obviously a lot of work that's going to be occurring with us and the stakeholders over the coming months, and we're looking forward to that feedback. As we move to the first workshop, which is going to likely take place here in just a couple of weeks, our intent would be to kind of recap this discussion with those stakeholders in the room, go into more detail about some of the specifics of the issues that I highlighted with you all today. And then for workshop number 2, kind of come to the table with our initial roadmap of kind of that high-level view of what we think good looks like and how we're thinking about laying that out. And then with workshop 3, after getting additional feedback from stakeholders, incorporating that and additional analysis, having more specificity around really that comprehensive roadmap and what are all those different steps it's going to take, so that we can then follow up these workshops with that second on-the-record presentation to the commission and present all the different options that were evaluated, as well as our recommended path forward. And with that, I'll take any questions. Thank you.
Mr. Doherty, thank you. Let me see if we have any commissioner questions. Chair Hahn, any further questions? Commissioner Coleman.
Yes,
when you're ready.
thank you. Hi,
Good morning.
good morning. Your slide 21, please. Key challenges to legal entity consolidation. You talked about I'll let you get there.
This one?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you. You talked a little bit about property tax burdens, so, and a shift there. Is the company looking at or has been advised or abreast of significant changes in the shifting of property taxes?
Sure, yeah, we've done some preliminary analysis, but, we need to vet it further. But as you look at the way that the property taxes are assessed by pole miles, if we bring those two entities together in Missouri, there's going to be some more urban counties that are likely going to see some of that property tax burden shift to some of the more rural counties. And so you're going to see a decrease in some of those property taxes collected at some of those urban counties, and you're going to see more property tax collected in some of those rural counties.
All right, and, okay.
And to a varying degree, Commissioner. Some have a bigger impact than others.
Okay, and slide 23. No, I'm sorry, 24. So you have a bullet point fourth down about customer communication, customer service support. Is this an indication that Evergy learned something from the time of use rates controversy?
It really wasn't in response to time of use or anything like that specifically. It really is any time that we go to consolidate, if we move forward with rate consolidation, they're going to see their bill change, and they're going to see what they pay change to some degree, in some manner, right? It could go up or down. And so it's going to be really important for us to kind of have extra additional communication to customers anytime we have a significant change like that on what is happening and kind of the why behind why it's happening.
Okay, that's a good professional answer, but I recall there being a little bit of negative press about the time of use rates. And I'm just wondering what you learned from it.
Sure. Well, I don't know if Darren had anything he wanted to expand on with regards to that, but
Yeah, so, probably a lot of interesting topics to talk about with time of use. You're right, there was clearly some negative press. I mean, I think if you polled our customers today, there's probably still some negative undertones of, people have long memories. So there will be some learnings from that, no doubt. We've also had the benefit, Matt alluded to it earlier, in the not-so-distant past, at least during my career, which may be getting to a distant past. We've done some consolidations in Kansas of rate jurisdictions as well as Missouri. So we understand some of the things that drew interest of customers in those consolidations. And I think anytime you're making moves in customer rates, I mean, we're going to just have to be thoughtful about kind of a holistic communication strategy and work well with our comms team and work well with our stakeholders to make sure we're all aligned with the benefits and the rationale for the steps that we're taking. So hopefully we'll incorporate learnings from all those different facets of customer touch points.
The only thing I would add, Commissioner, is we are currently working with OPC and have been on website design and other things. And as I said at the beginning, this will be a very collaborative process. So we hope to get the insights from all the stakeholders about how those communications should go, what manner, what level, how specific, how often. The goal of this is at the end of this, we have a plan that everybody agrees on. And that includes communications to customers with the input of OPC staff and other important stakeholders to make sure that we do get that right. Because based on, and again, we haven't gone far enough down the path to know exactly what it's gonna look like, but any disruption is not great for customers. But the goal is to have an agreed-upon plan that we can all stack hands on and execute, and make sure that the customers are fully informed in what's happening.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Chair Hahn, any questions?
Thanks, Matt. On slide 22, so I reviewed it previously, and clearly the list of benefits to customers is impressive. But when I look at slide 22, I'm immediately concerned about the cost and the impact to ratepayers. So you mentioned mitigation strategies. So high level, what would be your strategy to mitigate $600 million of refinancing costs?
Sure. Well, again, this, of course, is a point in time, but one of the things that we will have to do that will be part of our due diligence as we go through the process is to really dig in more detail to the covenants and the change of control terms of our different indentures, of our current indentures that we have. And so it's going to look at, what are our options to move forward with or without bondholder consent, and that's going to inform how that might be treated. And so that's certainly something that KG&E is a separate legal entity today. Since the time that the company was acquired by Kansas Power and Light back in 1992, so it's not insignificant of something to look at and work through. It can be done, but it's going to require us working with special bank representatives that really look at this to help us work through and understand kind of what those options might be, and if there are some ways to overcome the initial view of what that looks like.
Thank you.
Did anybody else have anything to add?
I was just going to say, I think the easy answer is if this were the outcome, I think our recommendation back to this commission would be, well, look, it doesn't make sense to move forward. There's no way we can overcome that kind of financial burden on customers to incur these charges. But we'll work with the experts. Each phase, as we put a roadmap together, is going to require some unique expertise, be it legal or otherwise, investment bankers to help us work through it. Interest rates matter. So it's not the best time right now, right? We have some pretty low-cost debt on the books at the utilities today. I mean, if interest rates would go down, it'd move that $400 million number pretty substantially. The one that's probably easier to work with is the make-whole payments. If you can work with banks and you can get investment bankers involved, you can probably negotiate through some of that stuff once we really start to lean into it. So that'll be the strategy of that phase, right, is how far can we move this down, and can we get it to a point where stakeholders can align and say, yeah, there's really enough benefit here to incur some level of nominal costs if there is some.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Let me see if we have any further commissioner questions. Commissioner Kolkmeyer, any questions?
Yes, thank you, Judge. Good morning, Mr. Doherty.
Good morning.
Sorry I couldn't be there in person today. A busy day. This is much more complex than what I think we anticipated it being. But I think you hit on it in the beginning, the very beginning. And if you would take me back to what you started or how you started, is why was all of these separate entities versus under one? Why? Can you explain that?
Sure.
Maybe?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, it really, Evergy is really kind of today where we sit is really a product of all of those prior mergers and acquisitions over time. And so as those occurred, you had different, the legal entities were treated in different ways. And so you really have today in Kansas, we have Evergy Kansas Central is our operating company, which is the former Westar Energy, but under it still sits a separate legal entity of Evergy Kansas South. They had not taken to date those additional steps for legal entity consolidation, but they have taken the steps that we're talking about here today on rate jurisdiction consolidation years ago between those. And so the customers in Kansas for that utility have a single set of rates, even though behind the curtain there are two different legal entities. And like we said, are there potential benefits to legal entity consolidation in that example? Yes, where you've got Evergy Kansas Central is kind of limited on its bondable capacity in issuing debt, but Kansas South has that capacity, and so legal entity consolidation, a potential benefit would be to kind of unlock that. With Evergy Metro, Evergy Metro is the former Kansas City Power and Light, which served both Missouri and Kansas customers for many years. It's been like that for many years, but we do have two separate rate jurisdictions today, one for our Kansas customers and one for our Missouri customers, but it's a single legal entity, so we have assets that are owned by that legal entity, so we have to allocate the generation, the transmission assets as an example across those state lines today. So it's one operating company, two rate jurisdictions, whereas the Kansas example I gave you is two legal entities, one rate jurisdiction. And then we have Evergy Missouri West, which serves our customers today, which is historically, it's the Aquila company, which before that was a combination of Missouri Public Service or Utilicor and St. Joe Light and Power. And we've already gone through the work of rate consolidation between the old Missouri Public Service and St. Joe Light and Power a few years ago. So the Evergy Missouri West customers have one set of rates today that they are under, and it's also just a single operating utility.
What is the temperature of the Kansas utilities? Commission, do they want you to consolidate as well, or?
I would say that we haven't really had those conversations in earnest to date. I'd say that Missouri, has opened this docket, and we are going to be doing a lot of work participating in this docket, but it's our plan concurrently to have some of those same discussions over in Kansas, because like I said, ultimately anything that we do that we want to do in Missouri is going to also require stakeholder input and support from our Kansas Commission as well.
So,
Thank you.
So, Commissioner, I might add to that.
Yes.
In Kansas, we have a set of stakeholders that many of them remember, and they lived kind of the rate consolidation process between the two entities that Matt talked about. And starting back with that combination in the 90s, that there was a lot of contention in the state of Kansas between the customers of those two entities. Enough so at the start that Wichita, one of the larger cities in Kansas, spent a lot of time talking about municipalizing because they didn't want to participate with the jurisdiction that was in the north part of the state. So that was the framework over there. So I would say they are a little more hesitant to consolidation and combination, and recognize that there are going to be some considerations that we have to work through. So doing a very parallel path with them while we're going through that with Missouri is going to be super important to us to share the information and bring them along, because Matt said it right. If we get to the point where we're going to address Metro, both the Kansas Commission and this commission are going to have to work on that, and we're going to have to figure out how to split that entity in a way that's going to make sense for both states.
Darren, wasn't the problem in Kansas with KG&E and KPL exacerbated by the fact that KG&E was the Wolf Creek owner? And would that be similar in our considerations going forward?
Yeah, that's exactly right. They, the South had ownership in a nuclear facility. The North in Kansas was pretty heavy coal concentration. The coal folks weren't interested in paying for the rate-based cost of the nuclear, and the nuclear folks weren't interested in moving back towards coal. So that was kind of the dividing line when they were looking at combining. We still had people in our last local public hearing in Kansas that suggested it was a lifetime commitment that the North would never pay rates that had nuclear in them, and they didn't understand why the commission had allowed rate consolidation a few years ago, because they understood that to be a lifetime commitment, some customers. So they still talk about it in Kansas.
What is the life cycle of the nuclear in Kansas?
Right now, we have a life extension to 2045, which is a 60-year operating life. And then there are some facilities that have initiated moving for another 20-year extension to get to 80. And we'll probably start that evaluation in earnest in upcoming next couple years. That's a multi-year process to determine if you're going to do that and work with the NRC and others. But so either 2045, or if we get an extension, it would move out to 2065.
And there's no securitization on that one, correct?
I don't recall in both states if what the treatment is around the securitization on that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Judge.
Commissioner Coltmeyer, thank you. Commissioner Mitchell, any questions?
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for your presentation. I know that this is a much more intricate and complicated process, I think, than any of us really know at this point. And I think as we get started kind of teasing out these issues and going through them one by one, we'll come to a better understanding of it for sure. I would appreciate at each, kind of juncture in this, a fatal flaw analysis. If we come upon something that that really makes it impractical to continue, that we recognize that, and at that point conserve our efforts for things more productive. I'm also curious. I'm sure there'll be a vast number of stakeholders who will weigh in on this idea, and it may be premature to ask this question. So if it is, just I don't know is a perfectly fine answer. But how might this impact operating relationships with Southwest Power Pool, and are there potentials to unlock benefits for maybe more innovative ways to route power or to relieve congestion and therefore relieve some congestion pricing? Or are we just not far enough into it to have an understanding of that yet?
So this is Darren Ives. I think the answer is kind of a soft. We don't know. In general, I think we are able to take advantage of a lot of the benefits at Southwest Power Pool today through the transfer of power, whether or not we have separate rate jurisdictions or even legal entities. So we've been able to capture a lot of those benefits. Will we find a few more as we, think about kind of a final steady state? Hopefully there'll be a couple things in there, but we feel like we've captured quite quite a few of them as we've gone through our early stages of the combinations.
Yeah, and I could say we also, have to look at those potential challenges as well. I mean, one of the examples of splitting Metro, the legal entity, is that it currently has a single settlement node with SPP, and so we'll have to think through, and transmission assets, for example, are allocated on line miles for the most part, so we'll have to, think through a transmission study and what that looks like as you split Metro legally as well from that perspective.
Okay, I appreciate that answer. I don't have anything else, Judge.
Right, Commissioner Mitchell, thank you. Any further bench questions? Anything further from Evergy?
Yeah, this is Darren Ives again. I mean, I guess I would just say I appreciate the opportunity to come and, be in front of you today and start to lay out the path. We've got a lot of work to do. We've started, we've done a lot of preliminary analysis, but our engagement in these next steps with stakeholders is going to be critical. One, to help validate what we've seen so far, and also help identify things that maybe haven't bubbled up in our mind. So this will be a really interesting year for us to work through some of this and hopefully be able to come back to the commission at the end of this time with a well-vetted recommendation with, I hope, a lot of analysis around the benefits and the opportunities, and again, a lot of analysis to Commissioner Mitchell's point of where our fatal flaws are and where the off-ramps need to be considered, because if there's something that's not going to bring benefit to customers and going to saddle costs, we need to probably step back and be comfortable with where we're at and move forward in that vein.
Right, thank you. If there's nothing further from Evergy, hearing nothing, I don't want to prevent other stakeholders from making comments or responses. Does anyone, staff, public counsel, anybody else have anything that they would like to say?
Looking back, Judge, staff has nothing at this time, but we will have comments.
Certainly, thank you.
If you want to. Yeah, the Office of Public Counsel, thanks Evergy for coming forward and putting forward its perspective on this issue. There's certainly a lot of information here, and we look forward to working with the company to coming to understand these terms and try to have a better understanding of the process as a whole. And we believe that there's definitely some benefits here to be unlocked, so we're eager to find solutions. Thank you.
Mr. Kleiser, thank you. Any other comments, responses? Hearing nothing? All right. Thank you very much. That will conclude the on-the-record presentation in EW 2025-0220. Thank you very much. We're off the record.